Welcome to the Grow People podcast. The Grow People podcast, of course, features Pastor Jason, lead pastor at Revolution Church. I'm David Stein. The discipleship / formation / whatever else you want to say, pastor.
I was just going to let you keep talking.
Yeah, I'll just go on.
Now I feel like I need to save you.
I have many name tags from over the years. We could just combine them all.
We could.
The purpose of the Grow People podcast, of course, is to help grow people. Grow people as we come out.
Throw your head back. Say it.
Yes, grow people. As we come out of the 21 days of prayer and fasting and into the continuation of the Abide season, we could call it that, as we're getting ready for the Abide cohorts.
Well, Abide season.
Abide.
The year of abiding.
Yes. If you had a word for this year and it was Abide, you did well.
Yeah, because the Puxatani Phil saw his shadow. We have 6 more weeks of winter and 6 more weeks of Abide.
Have we ever... That's good. Have we ever talked about the time on the radio I had Punxsutawney Phil assassinated?
No.
Oh my. Okay.
You had him assassinated?
Assassinated, yeah. So, I was doing morning radio in Pennsylvania, just like silly morning zoo radio.
Yeah.
It was the Mike and Dave show. And I said to Mike, why don't we do something crazy for Groundhog Day? And he said, what? I said, well, just play it by ear.
Yeah. So
we had a character on the show named Morty, and I actually was the voice of Morty. And and Morty was this old Jewish man.
Yeah.
not a stretch.
At the time, it's you.
Yeah. And we would send Morty everywhere. So he was at the launch of the space shuttle, and he was at the Olympics, and he would call in the phone, and people would think there's an actual reporter named Morty. Yeah. So we send Morty to Punxsutawney, and I remember this vividly. He says, "Here comes Phil. He's coming out of the hole," and then you hear gunshots.
Oh gosh.
and we played it out like the JFK assassination. and the funniest line, I'm dying here. This is 1988. The funniest line was at the hospital, after this goes on for like 2 hours on the morning show, and people are losing their mind.
Because they thought it's like reading the what's that show, or the where it was read on radio, and people thought it was actually happening.
Yeah, War of the Worlds. War of the Worlds.
So it's like this.
And parents are calling up, and they're so angry because they had little kids in the car, and we just killed Punxsutawney Phil. and Morty is standing outside the hospital, and we go, "Okay, Morty, what's going on now?" And he goes, "I have to report that Phil is dead."
Oh, no.
No more weeks of winter for Phil. Oh, I had forgotten.
Forgot about all that.
I have forgotten most of my life because I've had 19 of them.
That's why we call you the most interesting man.
So there was the Punxsutawney Phil.
But when you would do this character, you wouldn't actually go anywhere. You were still in the
we were still in the studio, and I would go back and forth between a regular microphone and the telephone.
Oh my God.
And nobody knew.
So you were actually on a telephone doing this recording. So
Yes, and it sounded like I was having a conversation with Morty. I would say, "Hey, Morty, what's going on?" "Well, let me tell you something, Dave."
So now, maybe at the Abide cohorts, we can do a call-in with Morty or something.
We could do that.
Come to Abide cohorts and get to hear from Morty.
"Let me tell you about some Old Testament covenants."
No, I had no idea. I knew you were from Pennsylvania, and I have meant to ask you about this tradition, because it is rather wild, and unscientific.
Very.
But it just is funny. But because this just happened, last week? When he
February 2nd,
and saw his shadow.
Yep.
But this was basically all like just a a stunt.
Yes.
Right? Like
Yes.
just to make this town.
And it became a tourist thing.
It
And
was like
people
a German thing or something.
It was.
Right?
It was. Yeah. Pennsylvania has a very Germanic background.
Yes.
So the Pennsylvania,
Texas.
the Pennsylvania Dutch spread out amongst the colony.
Yeah.
I guess that's the word.
It is.
Yeah.
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 Penn, from William Penn.
And then it just became a thing, and people travel to Punxsutawney every year.
Yeah, to see.
But that year they saw something quite remarkable. and the assassin was Elmer Wilkes Fudd.
Oh gosh. For those who maybe don't know about Bugs Bunny.
Yes.
Yeah. So did people start to figure that out then? Like, did you have to come in and issue a statement?
Oh, we got in so much trouble. We had to issue a statement. It was in the newspaper.
It was.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So legit, like, caused a panic, just like War of the Worlds.
Yes. Yeah. And I remember saying on the air, if you think that this is real, you've got real problems.
Which that right there is like the best learning for ministry ever.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like understanding that people, you have to lead people to understand.
Yeah. And this wasn't like, there were real legit panics that people in radio did. Like they would say, Taylor Swift is at the radio station. Come on down and get free tickets.
Yes.
And then people would get into car accidents, and that's awful stuff. That's That's panic stuff.
Yeah.
This was Punxsutawney Phil was not assassinating people.
Yeah, we're just having fun. Yes.
So if your kids are in the car right now and they're freaking out that we shot the groundhog,
yeah, he didn't. He's alive and well.
Yeah, and it was 40 years ago. So
I haven't done enough research on this, obviously, and you may know, but is this like a mascot, like Georgia or Texas, like they're that mascot for until they die? Like, is the groundhog just some random groundhog every year, or is this like a groundhog that somebody takes care of all year, and then does he live in this hole all year?
They're bred in Japan. They play classical music over them. They're massaged in whiskey. I don't know. I would imagine it's kind of like Uga. Like there's an Uga, and then Uga dies, and there's another Uga. Yeah.
Like I didn't know if it was just a random groundhog, or is this like it's a family of groundhogs that live in this hole all the time?
It could very well be.
Because then I'm thinking, like, does he just come out of his hole naturally? Do you have to go get him out? Like,
you gotta get him. you gotta reach in. It's like what's the term for fishing for catfish with your hand? Noodling.
Like when you stick your hand and they bite you, that kind of thing.
He's probably just noodling.
Yeah. Because they're all wearing, like, it's very official top hats and tuxes.
Oh yes. Yeah.
So that's what I was. It's just the most random thing of like guys in top hat and tuxes holding this groundhog. Like
yeah, and
it's fascinating.
And I'm sure there is something wildly biblical about the fact that there's sometimes no shadow, sometimes there is a shadow reaching into the hole to get. I don't know.
I don't know where you're going with that one.
Neither do I. So it's about time to talk.
Let's just say,
hey, how about that book of Ezra?
Yeah.
How about Ezra? Ezra's good.
Speaking of abiding.
Yeah. So we got the cohorts coming up. If you haven't signed up for the cohort, here's what's going to happen. Pastor Jason is going to teach 3 sessions on 3 consecutive Monday nights. It's going to be live in
3 weeks, 6 sessions.
Yes.
Yeah.
3 weeks, 6 sessions.
2 sessions a night.
2 sessions a night. And this is going to be broadcast to the Jasper campus.
Yep. Yeah, we're doing both locations.
If you go to Jasper, go to Jasper. If you go to Canton, go to Canton. And you're going to teach on what does it look like to create rhythms that Jesus had in order to live life in community with those rhythms.
Yeah. Yeah, this is really, and we've been working on this for years, and I think we even mentioned it last week, just a part of our whole formation strategy. So this is kind of the next iteration of that, because Abide is great, and it's a great season in the life of our church, but we really want to help people to continue to abide, which is kind of how we got into this whole conversation of like continuing this season of abiding. So we've been working hard trying to figure this out to really help men and women in our church take the next step. And so, this cohort, it is a training, like it will be teaching, and that's so 3 weeks, those 6 sessions, and we will talk about a plan, not a plan that we came up with. This is pretty ancient in the life of the church, developing a rule of life, but we put our spin on it, calling it the Revolution Rule of Life, and helping people come up with a rule for their life, a structure, rhythms for their life. And then that will be a catalyst launching into formation groups for men and women. So you'll get a lot more detail about that. But if you're signed up at your campus, if not, sign up. We have 100. I mean, it's been pretty amazing.
Yeah, there's over 600 signed up in Canton, over 100 in Jasper.
Yes.
So it's really it's going to be a great turnout. I think it's going to be a wonderful catalyst into the next step of formation.
Yes.
So what do you need when you come? Open hearts, pray that God does something in you and through you. And we'll provide a pen and some stuff to write on.
Yes, we'll provide materials. So this will be not a class, but we will teach. There'll be some fill in the blanks for those of you that like that. But again, it's not just designed for you to come and get information like a lot of classes are. Not that courses, we'll do those. Those aren't bad. But this is really designed to teach you how to develop something in your life, and then throughout the 3 weeks, you'll have an opportunity to think on your life, think about your life and the rhythms that you want. So really our goal is after this cohort for you to have developed your own rule of life. And then we will help you take your next step to live out that rule of life with some men and women. You
can sign up on the website or on the app, the Abide cohorts. It does segue well into what we're going to talk about now, because purpose of these cohorts, the purpose of a rule of life is to bring everything in life under the authority of God.
Yeah.
So if we're going to follow Jesus, and that's the invitation we got, come follow me.
Yes.
The invitation is come follow me. How do we do that? We do the things that Jesus did in order to become more like him, which means if it's not something he did, if it's not in the regular rhythms of Jesus, we can't put it under the authority of God if God is not commanding us to do that. So putting everything under God's authority in our lives means we have to take a real hard look at the sovereignty of God.
Yeah.
Is he sovereign or is he not? And that's the main point of the first message in Ezra.
Yes.
And you talked briefly about why we went into Ezra, but if you could expand on that, and then how we got to really focusing on the sovereignty of God.
Yeah. I mean, that is pretty much the main message in Ezra chapter 1. And I mentioned this. I got to preach Thursday night. I got to preach 8 a.m. In Canton, and then I was actually sick. I got sick before Sunday. So then at the 9:30, 11:15.
Has anyone said to you, or have 5,000 people said to you, it's going around?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
You got sick?
I was so close to punching someone that said that.
Yeah. It's one of those things now. We're a little off topic.
Yeah.
We're kind of on topic because I changed it, but I feel like it's one of those things that just people say when they don't know what to say.
Yeah.
What do you got? I don't know. Well, it's going around.
How about, I'm sorry you feel sick?
Yeah, exactly.
Give me that.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm praying for you. I hope you feel better.
If you did say it's going around, it's okay. I was not going to punch you.
No, I say it. I mean, I have said it.
Right.
Because people ask me, what do you have? Because I'm just at that point in my life where there's so many things going around, like flu, COVID, cold, viruses, bugs. I don't even, unless I get really bad, I don't even go to the doctor. Because it really doesn't change what you do. Whenever I get sick, I just load up on some vitamins, more than I would normally take. And then if I don't really go get antibiotics. Again, not that that's bad, but if I have a fever and then I start getting body aches, then I will. But it's like, it doesn't really change what you do. You have congestion, you have body aches, you're going to take the same kind of stuff.
Yep.
So I know something's going around and I don't really know. People are like, do you know what it is? No, because it doesn't really change what I do.
I wonder if, as we're talking about Ezra and as they're wandering in the wilderness and somebody got sick, is Moses like, it's going around, man?
Yeah, it's going around.
We're going around, but it's going around.
Yeah, in the same way we're going around. We're just going around the Bible. Because as everybody knows, we typically preach through books of the Bible. Over the last several months, going into end of last year and beginning of this year, we did a couple topical things. And one of those in October and November was the series Exiles and Ambassadors. And so I knew last fall when we had planned that, we were going to do Advent, Christmas, and then we were going to do Abide. So all that was laid out. But then I knew I wanted to jump into a book, the next book of the Bible, but I wanted to go Old Testament because I do think it's important. I don't think we've said this on here, maybe. Even if we had, we've probably all forgotten. So we need to go around again. But I think it's important for us to, as we teach through books of the Bible, I think that's the best way to teach, but then also making sure we're having a healthy diet, that we're not just living in the Gospels or living in the New Testament letters. And so we try to go not always back and forth, like one Old Testament book, one New Testament book, but we try to make sure we have a healthy diet of that. And so,
and the church loves that.
I'm glad.
Yeah.
I mean, it's good because, anybody who, even if you're new to Jesus or even if you don't know Jesus, I think people are intrigued by the Bible. I mean, it is the best-selling book forever. It is the most popular book, hands down. So even if someone is not a believer and a skeptic, I do think they're interested in this book that has shaped human history. Like, that's undeniable. But then, obviously, if you're a believer, then you believe that this is God's word to you, and you want to know how to read it. You want to know. So I felt like, again, we like to go back into the Old Testament. We did that with Micah and other books. And so, and it just felt right, like talking about the subject of exile. So it's like, well, let's go look at the book or a period in the life of Israel where they were coming out of exile. And what I love about, as I mentioned this last weekend, Ezra and Nehemiah were originally one book that were together. And even at the end of Second Chronicles, it talks, like the end of Second Chronicles ends the same way that Ezra begins. And then even in Ezra, it'll mention Haggai and Zechariah. So we'll kind of talk into those minor prophets as well. So it's a very important book in the life of the history of the people of God. But what I also love about it is not only it's an important book, but Old Testament books are different in that, like, Ezra is not on the surface teaching you how to live your life like a letter of the Apostle Paul or Peter in the New Testament. Those are clearly like writing to churches, telling them, here's what you're doing wrong, here's what you need to do right, that kind of stuff. Ezra is history. It's telling us about the history of the people of God, post-exile, coming out of Persia. But in studying history like that, you can look and see, okay, what did God do? So what does it teach me about God?
Right.
And then what does this teach me about how the people responded to God? And so to your point, what we see in Ezra chapter 1 in the opening, 4 verses, we see the sovereignty of God, the doctrine of the sovereignty of God. We see that God is working out his plan. And it's amazing to me. And that's why I think this is a great book to study. Because as I referenced, we also, because it says in the first 2 verses that in order to fulfill the word that God spoke through the prophet Jeremiah, he stirs up Cyrus, the king of Persia's heart. So then you have to look at, well, what was the word that he spoke through the prophet Jeremiah? So then we went back and looked at Jeremiah 29. And I joke about this, and I don't mean to, I'm not making fun of anybody when I joke about this. But Jeremiah 29:11 is a very famous verse. It arguably might be the second most famous verse after John 3:16, because it is a verse that we need. It's a promise. When God says, "I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you, or plans for your welfare," as the ESV says, and not to harm you or not evil. That's a great verse, and we should hold on to that. The only thing I think how that verse gets misused is when we take it out of context, we don't know, and I think a lot of people just didn't know.
I got a mug with Jeremiah 29:11 on it when I was a new believer. So we're talking 2007, 2008, and I was like, "This is an awesome mug," and it was like that first matte black mug.
Yes.
And I was like, "This is a great looking mug," and I had no idea what the context was.
Even as a Jewish person,
yes,
you should know that.
Yeah, no idea what the context was until many years later.
Yes, and that's my issue with it is people love the verse, but they don't love the doctrine behind the verse, meaning God said right before that verse, or in the context of that verse, I'm about to exile you for 70 years. Which you think of 70 years. I mean, that's a whole
lifetime.
Yeah, I mean, biblically speaking, that's almost 2 generations. Because typically generations are counted by 40 years. So it's almost 2 generations of people. So we have to take that verse of like, I have plans to prosper you. Yes. But the reason why God told them that is because I'm about to punish you. First, I'm going to punish you, and then I'm going to prosper you. The way you see this, like, and it's important to know that even when we all have these seasons in our life, and they might be 70 years, they might be 40 years, like in the wilderness, that might be 7 years, they might be 7 weeks, 7 days. I mean, the amount of time is irrelevant. The point is, in the middle of these seasons of exile in our life, we do need to know that there is a sovereign God who has a plan. There is a sovereign God who's in control. Now, on the flip side of that, I think there are well-meaning Christians that will take bad things that happen and try to act like they're good. That's not what we're saying either.
Right.
Like, exile was bad, and it was hard, and the temple was destroyed. A whole nation of people uprooted and moved. None of that was good. So when bad things happen in our life, I think people think that to accept the doctrine of the sovereignty of God, they have to accept, or they have to try to do the mental math, if you will, of like believing that this bad thing is a good thing.
Yeah, let's talk about the struggle with the sovereignty of God. Because it is a struggle.
Yeah, it is.
I question why. I think that's okay. Lord, I don't know what you're doing. That's okay too. But still bringing it under his authority of, okay, you're sovereign. I don't like this. This isn't fun. And I don't know what you're going to do, but I trust you in it.
Yes. Well, and I think that's the important point to learn. Because it is a wrestle, and again, and I understand that it's been a wrestle in my own life. Like I don't ever want to act like I'm preaching something like I came to this conclusion easily. However, at the same time, I think what the doctrine does for us is, and I remember, we both have had to do some hard funerals and be in some hard times with families. In fact, I had just moved here to Revolution 15 years ago, and it was in my first 3 or 4 months of being here. There was a couple that had been a part of our church that, I didn't know, but I had just gotten to know. And they had just lost their early young adult daughter. And so I had to go do her funeral. And I was talking to the parents that I'm just getting to know. And they were asking me those questions, why? And I said, I don't know why. I don't have that answer for you. But here's what I can tell you. Not like if you let this circumstance lead you to not believe in God because you think he failed you or he did something wrong or something, like if he is a good God, how could he let this bad thing happen? Like your daughter has died and you have to deal with that. So not believing in God doesn't help you. Because if there is no God, then that means this act is utterly random.
Right.
And I think that's the flip side of the doctrine of God, the doctrine of the sovereignty of God. Like, if God is not sovereign, then the other way is actually worse.
Yes. Yes.
It doesn't help you. Like, if evil things happen and bad things happen, and God is not in control ultimately of using those things for good, they're not good, but using them for good, or undoing them one day in the future. That's literally when Christ returns. Like Jesus raising from the dead, and we'll celebrate this on Easter, obviously, which we're super excited about Easter. We're going to do kind of a multi-week thing on Easter, so it won't just be one weekend. But Jesus didn't just die and raise again. Jesus died and then undid death. And I think that is the point of the doctrine of the sovereignty of God. How could God, a good God, let his son die and experience the pain and tragedy that he did of crucifixion? Because he knew he was going to undo it. So the undoing of it, though, doesn't make the death any easier. Jesus still had to endure the pain. Everybody was all confused. But then God undid it. So that what the doctrine of the sovereignty of God allows us, what it affords us is even though we don't understand, like at the point I made, we don't know the plans. But it allows us to know we know the one who knows the plans. And I can rest in that.
Yes.
I can rest in knowing that even though I don't understand why, I can know that one day he's going to undo this thing.
I've always seen it as one of the most comforting theological blankets.
Yes.
Because if the doctrine of the sovereignty of God is not true, then everything else fails after that.
Everything else fails. And that's why I made the comment. I know I made it on Thursday night. I think I made it on Sunday. Is I don't know how people live without this doctrine. And that's the part where I don't understand why people wrestle with it. I do understand it, so I'm not saying this arrogantly, but you do have to wrestle with it. But once you understand that, then I don't understand why people don't love it. Because what is the alternative? The alternative is, like talking about Jeremiah, God says to the nation of Israel, hey, I'm a just God. I have to punish you. So I'm going to punish you. And I really hope one day that I have the power to bring you back. I'm really going to work hard to get you guys back here. Like, I'm going to try real hard. The devil, he's a tough one, though. All these demons that are out there, man, I really hope that I can get you. I have plans, but I really hope I can execute those plans. Like, that's the alternative. Like, and that is the Asian. I say Asian. I'm talking about a bunch of Asian religions, like the doctrine of yin yang, of like evil and good in this epic battle. That is how most people. That's how movies portray. That's how most people think about good and evil in the world, which is a very Eastern mindset. That's what I mean by Asian. A lot of Asian religions that have come out of the East, that's how they think about it. Like, there's evil and there's good, and sometimes there's evil wins and sometimes good wins, and there's a little bit of evil and good, a little bit of good and evil, and there's this balance. Like, we're going for a balance here. I'm saying the heck with that. Like, no. Yes, there's evil in the world, and no, God did not bring evil. We did. But God is sovereign even over evil. And he can use, like when God says to them, I have plans, you can take that word to the bank.
Yeah.
And God's plans are not thwarted by the desires of a foreign king. I mean, this is why I love, and I love Ezra and I love the Bible. Like, Cyrus was the king of Persia. Like I said, that's modern day Iran. Well, Iran's in the news all the time because of what's happened there in the 70s when, radical Islam, took back over and we cut off diplomatic relations with them. So for the last almost 50 years, Iran has been in the news and them wanting to get a nuclear weapon, all that. I'm not getting into geopolitics, but my point is, none of that is news to God. And God knew that he had a plan then. He has a plan now. So we don't have to be afraid as Christians. Politics is a whole different thing. But even going back to exiles and ambassadors, we don't have to get so worked up as Christians like, oh, what about Iran? What about Russia? What about China? There's definitely evil dictators in the world, and it is a good thing to fight them and resist them. The Bible talks about that too. But as Christians, we don't have to get so worked up knowing, hey, whoever's in charge, God can stir up their heart.
Mm-hmm.
God can direct them. God can change their heart. God can awaken them. Nobody, no thing, no circumstance, no situation, no matter how bad, no matter how evil, is out of God's control to use.
That was one of the most encouraging parts of the message when you just mentioned toward the end, God stirred up the heart of the leader of the free world.
Yeah.
And if he can do that in him,
yes,
in the king of Persia, he can do that in anyone's circumstances in our lives.
Anytime. Like, yes, Cyrus, the king of Persia at that time was the most powerful man on the planet. Hands down. Again, and this isn't disputed in world history. This is what makes the Bible a very awesome book, because it is historically accurate.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, Cyrus, I mean, we talk about the president of the United States now as the leader of the free world, and that's true. I mean, he is the most powerful man in the world, but but Cyrus was more powerful than him, because as America, we're the most powerful nation, but we don't rule all the nations. Cyrus was the most powerful nation, and he ruled all the nations.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he said it. The Lord God has given me the kingdoms of the earth. So everything in the earth of course, it was a lot smaller geographically at the time. But he's the leader of the free world. He's the leader of everything. There's no free world. It's his world, and yet God's got to him. God stirred up his heart and used him for his own glory to accomplish his word for the good of his people. So yes, that's the part that I'm trying to say is no matter what person rises to power in the world today, God is more powerful than them.
There were two words that you broke down. You broke down sovereignty,
Mm-hmm.
reign over.
Yeah.
And you also broke down the word sojourn.
Yeah.
What did you mean by we can't out-sojourn God's sovereignty?
Yeah, I think I know for me as a Christian, one of the things I wrestle with is I always feel like at some point in time, God is going to say to me, enough, I'm done with you. Like, you've sinned too much. You've gone too far. I think all of us think that God is in love with some future version of us. God is really in love with the finished version of us. He doesn't really love the real me. He likes the resurrected me, that kind of idea. So in that same kind of way, I think we all think, and again, this is conjecture on my part. This is how I feel. I feel like we're always so concerned of like, well, God told me to go right and I went left. God told me to do this and I didn't obey. I disobeyed. And I use the example of Jonah in that. Like, we read Jonah, and this was a pretty new thought to me too, even in studying all this. We think Jonah is all about God's love for the city of Nineveh. And it is. I'm not saying it's not. Clearly, and he says in there, why should I not love this great city? Which Nineveh, ironically, I can't remember. Nineveh was either in Babylon or Persia. One of those two kingdoms. So it could have been in, like I said, Babylon is modern day Iraq. So even then, God loved this city. And then Jonah was like, the heck with that. As a Jewish person, he's like, I don't like them. And literally, Jonah was like, I know if I go there, you're going to have mercy on them. And I don't like them, so I'm not going there. So he runs the other way. So the story of Jonah is not just about Nineveh. It's about Jonah. It's about Jonah trying to outrun God's reign. Try to outrun God's rule in his life. And so he hightails it the other direction. God brings a storm, overthrows God. Then he goes into the ocean. Then God brings a great fish. And my point with that about out sojourn the sovereignty of God is you can't outrun his ability to get you. And I don't mean that as a bad way. I mean that in a good way. Like you can't out sin his grace. And there's no circumstance that's so bad or so evil. Like if we think of the worst case scenario in our life of getting some kind of diagnosis or being in the worst or being kidnapped or whatever, like thinking about even, Israel and Gaza and all that, there's no place on the planet that we can go that is outside of God's ability to rescue us, to save us, to come to us. So my point in saying that, and again, it was, and this is why I love studying the books of the Bible myself. Like obviously I knew the story of Ezra. I haven't preached through it, so I haven't studied it diligently. But as I was studying this, and we'll talk about this at some point, I always study, and then I think we mentioned this, but I listen to headphones and I sing. And as I was studying last Thursday and putting this message, putting it together, the final touches, and I saw that word, God says, wherever you sojourn. So his point was, I feel the word sojourn means a temporary location. The word journey. So it's like I'm on this temporary journey. So they'd been on this temporary journey for 70 years. At this point, it's like 55 years. And they felt like we're so far from home. We're so far from Jerusalem. I don't know if we're ever going to get back there. I know God spoke to us through the prophet Jeremiah a long time ago, but that I wasn't even there when he heard it. That generation died off. It's a new generation. Surely God's forgotten about us. But yet in God's timing, he awakens the heart of a king, stirs him up, and then says, wherever you have sojourned, the people there are actually going to pay for you to get back home. Mm-hmm. So not only can we not out sojourn his sovereignty, we can't outrun his rule and reign. God sovereignly decreed through a king that the people that were around the Jewish people had to actually give them money and goods to get back to Jerusalem. So there's the old phrase, where God guides, God provides. So again, we look at our circumstances, we're so far away and we have no money to get back. And God's like, so?
Yeah.
I'm God. You got me. That's all you need.
I hope if you're listening to that, you found that as wildly encouraging as I did. Mm-hmm. Just Sunday morning, sitting there at 8:00, being reminded of not only God's sovereignty, but the fact that I can trust in his sovereignty, even though I don't know the plan.
Yeah.
Because I know the one who made the plan.
Exactly.
Amen. That's good. We were planning on a podcast on abortion and its relation to some of the things happening in America. And we're still going to do that.
We're still going to do that.
Yeah.
I know I don't know if we mentioned last time that we would do it this time, but we're going to do it soon.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll get to it.
So we're going to get to that. We are going to get to what Pastor Jason just alluded to, which was the fact that he sings as he prepares his sermon. But there's something even more powerful than the singing that happens before that. Yes. Oh, that's a cliffhanger. That's a teaser.
Yes.
That's a teaser.
And it's how I trust the sovereignty of God.
Yes.
Yeah.
Don't forget, cohorts coming up. Sign up on the website. Yes, the cohorts will be recorded, but they're not going to be recorded just because you don't feel like going.
No, you need to be there.
Yeah. Our producer, Brian Damerow. Our video technician today, Neon Kian Sadiji.
Who is Persian, by the way.
Yes. How about that?
Yeah.
Do we refer to him now as the king?
Yeah. Maybe we just give him a nickname as Cyrus.
He is the king. Our key grip is
Keon the king. Keon.
Our key grip is Jakub Buszczykowski. Our film director, who is on our mission trip to Kenya right now, Marcos Guardiola. Our head of doctrine and theology, of course, is theologian. Our chief evangelist is salvation. Our backsliding prevention officer, lukewarm. Our director of Swedish witnessing is Bjorn again.
My favorite.
Our expert on Russian eschatology, Pitov Hell. Our director of holiness is mortification. Our staff counselor is Les Moody. been extremely busy lately.
He's been busy for years.
Our giving coordinator is Generosity. Our director of tithing is Tim Percent. Our nativity coordinator, she's from France, Beth Lachem. She's French. Our co-pastors of plagues are Manny Locust and Lance Boyles.
That's the one I really feel for. God, their parents.
Yes. Our Scottish eschatology professor, we moved it from Irish eschatology to Scottish eschatology because we're planting a church in Scotland, is Marco the Beast. Marco the Beast. Director of communication is Bernie Bush. Director of the Doctrine of Election is I Am Chosen. Our sabbatical director, Trip Long. Our missional expert, Sam Area. Our resident Trinitarian is Holly Spirit. Our strategist for the final battle is Irma Gedden. Her first name's Irma. Our resident prayer warrior is Neil Down. Our executive director of spiritual warfare is Demonic. Our head of the new AI initiative is Artificial. Artie.
I like Artie.
Artificial. And
still suspicious of it.
And our new staff member, and if you were at men's night, you will appreciate this.
Goodness, I don't know
our director of Old Testament covenants. He's been knighted by His Royal Highness, Circumcise. Circumcise. And this is our last podcast, ladies and gentlemen. It's great knowing you.
So many things to say right now.
And the best advice we ever, well, maybe the second best advice we ever heard.
Which fits well with today's topic of sovereignty is trust God and
bye.
Bye. We love you.